In the intricate world of Korean affairs, tailored intelligence makes all the difference. Korea Risk Group's consulting services offer specialized, actionable intelligence designed to guide your Korea-related decisions. We provide bespoke consulting services that cater to your unique challenges and goals. From policy analysis to market entry strategies, we bring clarity to complexity. Transform uncertainty into opportunity and visit koreapro.com solutions today. Hello listeners and welcome to the NK News Podcast. I'm your host, Jacco Zwetsloot, and this episode was recorded in the studio on the 11th of October 2024. And joining me in the studio today is Urs Gerber, who is a retired Major General of the Swiss Army. He's also a historian who has worked in strategic intelligence. From February 2012 to August 2017, he was head of the Swiss Neutral Nation Supervisory Commission delegation in Panmunjom. Urs, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Thanks, Jacco, for having me.
Now, Urs, you left Korea 7 years ago, and since then you've retired from your military career, but you keep coming back to Korea and you keep being involved in Korea. What brings you back and what makes you stay involved?
Well, I remember back in August 2017 when I had to leave Korea. So I went back home to Switzerland. But for me, Korea was was then and is still, to a certain extent, my second home.
Wow. Okay. So you say you had to leave in 2017 against your will because your time had run out and that's it?
No.
Oh.
I was absolutely happy to leave the job because after a certain period of time,
yeah,
you have to quit.
Right.
But to go back from a highly developed, technologically very advanced country back to in that area almost to Middle Ages was not a sort of favored option.
Mm-hmm.
But when you are then back, it's fine. And but whenever I land at Incheon Airport, aboard the bus or the metro,
yep,
I immediately feel at home.
Now, how do you assess the state of the Korean War armistice today compared to when you left it in August 2017 during the summer of fire and fury?
Well, I have to say, unfortunately, we're back to square one.
What do you mean by that?
You were mentioning when I left, it was fire and fury. I have the bigger butter than you have.
Mm-hmm.
You get a bloody nose.
Yep.
So the tensions in 17 were extremely high. I remember particularly the time when Park Geun-hye was in the impeachment process. South Korea had no elected president in charge, and as we all know, the prime minister, who is then a caretaker, has not all rights to go into decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So my feeling when I spoke to the military but also political leadership, there was a certain anxiety that the Americans, particularly the newly elected president in these days,
mm-hmm. President Trump back then, yeah.
Yes, that was Donald J. Trump, that he would sort of do the same thing as he did in Syria and Afghanistan just in the early stages of his presidency. So people were a little bit afraid, and the armistice, if I compare it, tensions were high because Kim Jong-un was still threatening the South towards the end of 17. And now I'm back. And when I left, there was no CMA.
Comprehensive Military Agreement between North and South.
Indeed. And I come back and I take note. Oh, okay, I knew it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's even worse. We were with the group yesterday up in Panmunjom.
Yeah.
And then you hear explosions, and you are told these are explosions where the North Koreans are severing streets, railroads, and what else? So I think
the inter-Korean railroads and
indeed,
roads that had been built back in the early 2000s.
Yeah. So basically, what apparently seems to be now be in place is North Korea implements what their leader has said, meaning to build a border towards South Korea. And I think that's certainly in terms of tensions and of, and you asked me the state of the military armistice agreement, it's one step further up or down. You can see it as you want.
Urs, what did you understand about your mission when you first came to serve at the United Nations Supervisory Commission, Neutral Nations Supervisory Commission in Korea?
Well, I had the luck that in my previous position as Deputy Director International Relations, I was the responsible in the Ministry of Defense in Switzerland for the NNSC back home, not in operational terms, but rather in political terms. So I was in close contact with our foreign ministry, who actually is running the commission in terms of guidance. Or not the commission, the Swiss delegation.
The Swiss half of the commission.
Yeah, indeed.
Because it's the Swiss and the Swedes.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Yes. So I was aware, let's say, on the political level, but then I had to get to know, and that was a coincidence to a certain extent, but then I had the chance really to implement it on the ground and to see what would that mean in military terms. So in terms of the environment, the context, I was very well prepared. But then when you come here and you have to interact with all your partners on different levels, then you start in some certain areas, you start from the scratch.
And so how quickly did you learn the rest of your role after arriving?
I have to say very quickly, first of all, the interaction with our Swedish colleagues, and particularly the head of the Swedish delegation, was very close. And
has it always been that way? I mean, you're a historian.
Good question. No. The answer is no. I think both sides would acknowledge that. There had been, in the past, I would not say real tensions, but the interactions were much less close as they are today.
That's interesting, yeah. Because, for me as a neutral outsider, to a certain extent, I and maybe some other people look at Sweden and Switzerland as almost being two sides of the same coin, that you're neutral, you're European, you weren't involved in the conflict, and so we just assumed that it would always be smooth sailing with the two of you.
Well, it was plus minus a smooth sailing, for sure, but even if you look the same, okay, they have more blonde hair, maybe are 2 centimeters taller than us, but we have many, in many areas, the same attitudes, but the educational system, or people are educated differently. Sweden is much more, there you feel, for instance, that Sweden, the education and the environment is slightly different. For instance, social security is different. There are minor things where if people come to Korea as member of the delegation and they are not aware of that, they always think, okay, the Swedes, they look like us. Okay, we speak in English, so everything's exactly the same. And it's very close, but in certain areas and in certain reactions to events and to whatever situations, they're behaving or they are taking a slightly different stand.
Right.
But I have to say that particularly with our expanded tasks, you might come to that later on, we had, and it was really a pleasure for both sides, I would stress that, we had the opportunity and pleasure to work together much more closely than in old days, where basically the interaction was restricted to the official meetings of the different officers or the commission as a whole, and maybe from time to time that you would have a common meal when you have major delegations. And already in my time, we were working separately, but meals were taken at the same place, even at the same table, and the interaction was really very close. And just I heard yesterday from Panmunjom that this has remained so also today.
Because you're physically sharing one camp together, but you have different separate buildings, right?
Yeah, actually, the camp, and as you have been up there, you might remember, there are sort of two small hills.
Mhm.
There is the Swiss hill when you come up on the left-hand side. So the Swiss are closer to the MDL. And then on the right-hand side, there is the Swedish hill.
Right.
And in between the buildings, those are the common used buildings like the DFAC, where you eat together, where the briefing rooms are and the storages are. So in the old days, the hills were the hills.
Yeah.
And there was less interaction. And nowadays, it's really close cooperation.
Curious to hear the rest? Become an NK News member today for access to the full episode. Head to nknews.org/join for more information about how you can hear the entire conversation, along with in-depth analysis and insights on North Korea and the region.